Look at her, everyone.
My best friend humiliated me in front of the Korean Mafia boss's family. She didn't know he had already chosen me as his wife. My best friend grabbed my sweater and yanked me forward like I was a coat she'd brought to donate, and she did it in front of the most feared family in Seoul. She was laughing when she said it. Don't be shy, Zuri. Tell them what you really do. 30 people at that long marble table, and every one of them turned to look at the trembling waitress in the second-hand cardigan, while Camille beamed in her champagne silk and her white fur. Finally, the centre of the room she'd spent 2 years trying to enter. What she didn't know, what not a single person at that table knew, except the man at the head of it and the old man beside him, was that the loose sweater she was mocking was hiding the child I was carrying, his child, and that I wasn't the help at that dinner. I was the reason there was a dinner, but before the silk and the city lights and the family that could end a person with a single phone call, there was a diner, a graveyard shift, and a girl nobody in that gold-lit room would have looked at twice. Let me take you back to how a girl who refilled coffee at a 2 a.m. diner ended up at that table at all. My name is Zuri. For 3 years I worked the late shift at a little corner diner in a part of Seoul tourists never see. Fluorescent lights, cracked vinyl booths, a neon sign that buzzed like a trapped fly. I came to Korea on a dream and a one-way ticket, and when the dream got expensive, the diner is where I landed. 12-hour shifts, tired feet. The particular loneliness of a city that's beautiful to everyone but you. Camille and I went back further than Seoul. We'd grown up 2 streets apart back home, 2 girls with nothing but each other, and a shared promise that one day we'd have more. She was the one who talked her way into rooms. I was the one who held her purse outside them. I loved her. I need you to understand that before you judge what she became. Because for most of my life, Camille was the only family I had. The cracks were always there, though. The way she'd call me my little homebody in front of new people. The way she lit up when I struggled and went quiet when I didn't. The way every story became about her by the second sentence. I told myself that was just Camille. Here's what Camille never knew about my quiet little life. About 2 years ago, an old Korean man started coming into the diner. Always the same time. Just past midnight, after the dinner rush, before the drunks. He'd sit in the back booth alone in a plain grey coat, order plain rice porridge, and stare out the window like the city owed him an apology. The other servers ignored him. Old man, cheap order, no tip. But there was something in the way he sat, straight-backed, dignified, profoundly alone, that reminded me of my own grandfather. So I started saving him the warm booth. I'd top off his tea without being asked. When he forgot his wallet, 3 nights running, I quietly covered it and never mentioned it again. We talked, slow, patient conversations into his careful English and my broken Korean. He told me about a wife he'd lost, about sons who only called when they wanted something, about being surrounded by people his whole life and never once being seen. I never asked his name. He never offered it. He was just the old man in the back booth, and I was just the waitress who was kind to him. Have you ever been good to someone when there was absolutely nothing in it for you? Hold on to that. The whole story turns on it. His name, I would learn far too late to change how I'd treated him, was Yoon Tae-suk, and the family he headed did not appear in any business magazine, because the Yoon family's business was the kind that owns the magazine, the building it's printed in, and a quiet portion of everything that moves through this city after dark. But I didn't meet the Yoons through the old man. Not at first. I met him on a Tuesday in the rain at closing time. A man came in soaked to the skin alone and sat in the back booth, the old man's booth. Black suit, tattoos crawling up past his collar, a face that had clearly trained itself to give nothing away. I didn't know who he was yet, but the room did. The cook went still behind the pass. 2 regulars near the door left cash on their table and walked out without finishing their food. My manager's hands shook so badly, he dropped a stack of menus and pretended he hadn't. Every instinct I had said dangerous. He ordered coffee and didn't drink it. He just watched me clean tables like I was a puzzle he couldn't solve. When I finally set the check down, he said, "You're the one. Excuse me. My grandfather talks about a waitress. Says she's the only person in 2 years who didn't want anything from him." He studied me. I didn't believe it. People always want something. I was too tired to be polite. "Your grandfather tips terribly and tells the same 3 stories. I keep his tea warm because he's lonely. That's not a strategy, sir. That's just Tuesday." For the first time, something moved behind that careful face. Almost a smile. His name was Yoon Do-hyun, and it would take me weeks to understand that the lonely old man in the grey coat had sent his grandson. The most powerful, most guarded man in Seoul. To see the woman who'd been kind to him by mistake. It started slow, the way real things do. He'd come at closing, and we'd talk in the empty diner with the chairs up on the tables. Not flirting, the other kind. About his grandfather, my mother back home, what it costs to build a life in a place that will always see you as a guest. He asked questions like the answers mattered. A man who'd been performed at his whole life, who could smell an angle from across the city. And there I was, with no angle at all, too tired to be anything but honest. The old man had been right. I didn't want his name. I just wanted some nights not to be invisible. That, Do-hyun told me much later, was the only thing he'd never been able to buy. He proposed in that diner. No crowd, no ring you could see from orbit. Just him in the back booth at 3 a.m. "My grandfather chose you before I did. He's never been wrong about a person in his life. Let me be the man who deserves what he saw." I said yes with a coffee pot still in my hand. We kept it quiet, and for good reason. His world is cruel to outsiders, and cruelest of all to a black foreign woman it has already decided is beneath it. Do-hyun wanted to do it right. To present me at his grandfather's 70th birthday banquet, with the patriarch's blessing already spoken, so no one could ever say I'd snuck in through a side door. That banquet was 3 weeks away. I was 11 weeks pregnant. And 3 days before it, I made the one mistake that nearly burned it all down. I told Camille I couldn't make her party because I had a thing with a family. She circled it like a shark smelling blood. "What family? Since when do you have family here?" And I, tired, careless, trusting the only person I'd ever trusted, let slip that an elderly man and his people had invited me to a big family dinner. When I said the name Yoon, Camille's whole face changed. I understand it now. For 2 years, she'd been clawing at the edges of Seoul's elite. The right brunches, the right photos, the invitations that never came. And here was plain little Zuri, the girl who held her purse outside the rooms, holding a key to the one house she could never buy her way into. "Take me," she said. "Not a question. You'll fall apart in there alone, babe. I'll be your +1. Every cell in my body said no. It was the clearest warning my gut had ever given me. And I smothered it the way I always had because saying no to Camille had never once felt allowed. I didn't tell her what the night really was. Not about Do-hyun, not the proposal, not the baby only 3 people in the world knew about. I figured she'd find out like everyone else, and we'd laugh about it on the way home. We did not laugh on the way home. The Yoon penthouse sat on the top floor of a tower that scraped the dusk. 2 men in black stood at the private elevator and didn't speak. One of them murmured into his cuff as we stepped out, and somewhere ahead of us a door was held open before we reached it. Inside. Floor-to-ceiling glass, the whole city smouldering gold and violet below. A single long marble table dressed in white roses and crystal and food that looked like jewelry. The family in dark silk. The men along the walls who weren't quite guests and weren't quite guards. When the patriarch shifted, in his seat, the conversation nearest him dropped to nothing, without anyone deciding to stop. This was not a room you raised your voice in. Camille was about to find that out. Camille walked in like she'd been rehearsing for it her whole life. She'd worn a champagne satin gown that caught every light in the room and draped a white fur over her shoulders like armor. And she had made sure, in the car, that I looked like exactly what she planned to call me. She'd forgotten to tell me the dress code, so I stood there in a soft beige cardigan and a plain skirt, the only person in the room who looked like she'd wandered in off a bus. "Oh, don't be embarrassed," she'd whispered, fixing her own lipstick. "Not everybody can pull off glamour. You're more of a cozy girl." I let it go. I always let it go. Hyun met us near the entrance, and here Camille made her first real mistake, though she wouldn't know it was one until the floor had already opened beneath her. She saw the most dangerous man in the room walking toward us, and she stepped in front of me, hand out, chin tilted, fur slipping just so off one shoulder. "Hi, I'm Camille. I came with Zuri. She's my +1. God, this view." He looked at her hand. He did not take it. He looked past her at me, and for half a second, that unreadable face went soft in a way only I would notice. And Camille read his silence as a door, as a shy, serious man who simply needed a brighter woman to draw him out. So, for the next hour she went to work, laughing too loud, touching arms, name-dropping people who'd never returned her calls, and every single time I drifted toward Dukyun or toward the old man at the head of the table, she caught my sleeve and reeled me back into the corner where she needed me to stand. "Don't hover, sweetie," she'd murmur, smiling at the room. "Let the important people talk." I should have spoken. I didn't. 10 years of being made small in front of crowds had taught my body to fold before my voice could rise. Then came the toast. The eldest Yoon daughter stood and tapped her glass, and the long table hushed. She spoke first in Korean, then in English for the guests. "Before we honor my father tonight," she said, "he has asked to recognize someone himself. Someone he says this family owes a debt it did not know it was carrying." Heads began to turn, searching. And Camille, who had spent the whole night certain she was the most important woman in any room she stood in, could not bear that all those powerful eyes might land on someone who wasn't her. So she rose. She grabbed a fistful of my cardigan and pulled me to my feet beside her, hard enough that I stumbled into the edge of the table. Along the walls, 2 of the men in black shifted their weight and went very still, their eyes flicking to the head of the table for a signal that did not yet come. Camille didn't notice. She lifted her glass and said, loud and bright and smiling so wide it could have cracked the windows, "Oh, this is perfect timing. I just have to say, I brought my friend Zuri tonight, and honestly, she's a waitress. A sweet little waitress at some diner. I've kind of taken her under my wing, given her a glimpse of the finer things. So thank you for letting someone like her sit at a table like this." She turned to me, still gripping my sweater, and delivered the line she'd clearly been saving all night, the one she was sure would crown her Queen of Seoul. "Go on, Zuri. Show them how you carry a tray. It's honestly so cute." The room went silent, not the silence of people listening. The other silence. The one that comes a half second before something shatters. I felt 30 faces on me. I felt the heat climb my throat. I felt the old familiar pull to shrink, to laugh it off, to make Camille comfortable in my own humiliation. And for one terrible second, I almost did. But then I felt something else. A small, certain weight low in my belly. A person who wasn't here yet. And I thought with a clarity that stopped the tears cold. No, you will not learn the world from a mother who let herself be erased at the table. I didn't have to say a single word. Because Do-hyun stood up, he didn't shout. Men like him never shout. He set his glass down with a click that sounded like a lock turning, and he came around that long marble table. Past Camille, who lit up and angled herself toward him like a flower toward the sun, her fur sliding off her shoulder, her smile already accepting the attention she was sure was hers. And he reached past her and held his hand out to me. I took it. His fingers closed around mine, warm and steady. Then his other hand settled at my back, and lower, resting flat and certain against the curve the loose sweater had been hiding, protective without spectacle, close enough that the whole room understood there was something here being guarded that mattered more than my pride. The older woman across the table saw it, and her hand flew to her chest. She understood before the words even came. He turned to the room and spoke, his voice quiet enough that everyone leaned in to catch it. "This is Zuri. She is the woman I have asked to be my wife." A sound moved through the table, that gasp a crowd makes when the floor of reality tilts. In 6 months, Yoon said, his hand still resting where his child was growing. She will give this family its first grandchild. She is not a guest at this dinner. He looked at Camille then, just once. The same look he'd given her outstretched hand at the door. She is the dinner. Camille's glass was still raised. Her smile was still half-formed on her face, her brain refusing to translate what her ears had just heard. "Wait," she said, and her voice came out small and cracked, nothing like the voice she'd used all night. "No, Zuri's a waitress. She's my plus one." And that was when the old man stood up. Yoon Tae-sik, the patriarch. 70 years old that night, the most feared man in the city, the reason every powerful person in that room had put on their finest silk. He rose slowly from the head of the table, and the entire room rose with him out of pure reflex. Everyone except Camille, who was frozen. He walked to me. He took my other hand in both of his, and he spoke to the table in Korean, his daughter, translating in a voice thick with feeling. 2 years ago, he said, I was a tired old man no one looked at. I sat alone in a diner at midnight because this house was full of people who saw my name and never once saw me. He looked at me, and his old eyes were wet. This girl kept my tea warm. She paid for my dinner when she thought I had no money. She did not know who I was. She has never known who I was. She was kind to a nobody. And in my whole long life, in all of my power, she is the only person who ever was. He turned to his family, and his voice hardened into the thing that had made him a legend. I chose her for this family before my grandson ever did. Anyone who insults her insults me. The most powerful people in Seoul bowed their heads to the waitress in the second-hand cardigan, and Camille, still holding her glass, fur pooled at her feet now, surrounded by a room full of strangers who had just learned exactly what she was, looked around for one single ally and found not one. One by one they turned from her, not with anger, with something worse. The quiet, total way people turn away from something they've decided is no longer in the room. I have seen a lot of people reach for the exact thing they wanted their whole life, grab it at last, and feel it turn to ash the moment it was finally theirs. That was Camille now, standing alone in the gold light, holding an empty glass, having gotten every eye in Seoul to look at her at last. I'd love to tell you I leveled her with some perfect cutting sentence. I didn't. I've learned that the people who need you small will never understand your worth in a single line, and you waste your breath trying to teach them. Camille left before the soup was served. No one stopped her. No one walked her to the elevator. She gathered her fur and the wreckage of her dignity, and the last thing she said to me, finally quiet, was, "You knew. You let me stand up there and do that." And she was right. I had let her. For 2 decades, I had let her build her sense of herself out of my smallness. What collapsed in that penthouse wasn't something I did to her. It was just the first room in our entire lives that refused to play the old game. That's the part people always get wrong about that night. They call it my revenge. It wasn't. I never exposed her. I never raised my voice. I just stopped standing in the spot she'd spent 20 years saving for me. And the second I stepped out of it, everyone could finally see how small the person doing the pointing had always been. Hyun and I married that winter, in a quiet garden ceremony, the old man planned down to the last white rose. Our daughter came in the spring. We gave her a Korean name her great-grandfather chose himself. Haewon, he said. Grace. Because grace was the thing that walked into his life through a diner door and changed it. Camille messaged me once, almost a year later. A long, careful paragraph. I've had a lot of time to think. I think I've been jealous of you since we were kids with nothing. I never said it out loud, not even to myself. I read it twice. Standing in a kitchen 70 floors above the city, she'd spent her whole life trying to climb. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt something quieter and sadder than that. I wrote back 3 lines. I would have brought you into all of this gladly. I tried to, for 20 years. But I can't keep being the small thing you stand on to feel tall. Become someone you'd respect, Camille. I'd have loved to meet her. I meant it. I still do. Here's what that table taught me. And it's the thing I want you to carry out of this story. The people who try to humiliate you in front of a crowd are almost never thinking about you at all. They're managing a terror about themselves. That without someone beneath them, they might just be ordinary. And the most powerful thing you will ever do is not to fight them, and not to expose them, but to quietly stop agreeing to stand where they keep placing you. Because the truth was never yours to shout. The truth only ever needed you to stop hiding it. If this story moved you, hit subscribe, drop a like, and tell me honestly in the comments, have you ever had a Camille? And did you finally step out of the spot they saved for you? Or are you still standing in it tonight? I read every single one. And remember, sometimes the quietest woman in the room, the one in the plain sweater carrying the tray, is the one the whole room was about to belong to. I'll see you in the next story.